Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and he's Roger Parks. And today, we're going to give you a break. You know, that feeling when you've done so much that you can't move. Every bone hurts, every joint hurts, every muscle aches. Well, you probably need some recovery. And that's the topic of today's episode. So, Roger, I know you need a break from me already, but it's too late now, buddy. We're into it. So let's talk recovery. And I like how you put this. I like how you put this in our prep. And it starts out as our superpower as humans is adaptation. But you say, nay, sort of. Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
All right.
And you're not a horse. Let's be clear to that.
Let's elaborate on that. We need to ground the conversation into some basic ideas about how humans work. And as far as I know, I'm not saying anything controversial. I've read about evolutionary biology in a few different places. They seem to suggest the same thing. So if I'm oversimplifying, I may be, but I don't think I'm misleading. If I am, yell at me in the comments. But the idea is this, that humans are, not my term, our superpower is adaptation. I've heard this said by many, many people, which is incidentally why I think it's funny when you get a lot of exercise people talking about, well, this is the way we were designed, or evolution wanted us to do this. Like, no, evolution let us do whatever it is we want to do because we're human. There are no
really
constraints.
Long time.
Yeah, it does take a while.
I read those books, Roger. I read those books. Born to walk.
We don't have constraints based on the way we were born or the way we've evolved. We can change, and that is something that's really, really vital to the human experience, is the ability to adapt. And it's not that I would take issue with that characterization, but I would sharpen it a bit and say that the thing that is really what we are good at is resource management. So the
human resources.
Yeah, well, not yet. If you keep it up, maybe. So the uncontroversial, I think, basic recounting is that Homo sapiens outcompeted other human subgroups or other competitors like Neanderthals, for example, because we are fatter, we are lazier, and we're more social. Those were kind of the big three things that stood out that allowed us to outlast other groups, even though they were smarter and stronger and all of that stuff. Those traces remain in our DNA to this day. And when you really look at a lot of these things, you know, the fact that we are fatter means that we can carry around more calories. The fact that we're lazier means we can spare more of those calories. And the fact that we are social means that we can do more with less, that we can outsource. I can say, hey, you do this and you do that. And we've got evidence of early Homo sapiens working together in order to get a job done, which is why we were able to outcompete other groups. So that's why I talk about resource management. That resource management's in our DNA. So yes, we are great at adapting, but we don't just adapt on a whim. You know, it's not like if adaptation were our true superpower, we would dive in the ocean and all of a sudden we've got fins 10 minutes later, right? That would be some real super stuff.
But the question is, if you get out of the water, do the fins go away? Because like, look, I might be on board for that, but I've got to be like the Little Mermaid, a human.
Okay, but let's indulge your nonsense and let's say that they do, right?
Yeah.
What happens if we adapt and then we adapt and then we adapt and then we adapt? In an ancient world where we don't have food as abundant as we do now, we would starve to death. If we adapted to every little thing, you know, if all of a sudden I'm walking out on the savannah and, you know, I grow thick hair so I don't get sunburned, cool.
Amazing.
But you know, what happens when it gets too hot and then all the hair falls out and I'm adapting to this, I'm adapting to that, I would starve to death. And that's the idea is that our systems are designed to manage our resources really, really effectively. So when we consider the remnants in our DNA that follow these rules, that means that we've got to really respect two things. One, which we've talked about plenty, and everyone else talks about plenty, is the stress part, right? In order to cause adaptation, you need to create stress. You need to create a reason for the human creature to change physically in order to not encounter the same stimulus unsuccessfully. Right. You go to lift something, maybe you can do it, but it's really heavy and you feel really tired. If you need to consistently lift this thing again, your body is going to be like, all right, I got to get you stronger because this is just unacceptable.
It's not happening anymore.
No, we'll get too tired. Potentially we're exposing ourselves to injury. No good. So the stress part needs to be consistent. It needs to be loud enough, right? Our bodies need to get the message. But on the flip side of that, what keeps things balanced is we also need to recover from it. Because if we go too hard at adaptation, that doesn't respect the fact that we evolved at a time when resources were limited, and we couldn't just postmate Brontosaurus burger or whatever. So
like Fred Flintstone and shit.
Obviously, see, we have my pop culture references.
That's right. So, yeah, from the 50s.
So
the 1900s, if you will.
So we needed not just to have really persistent and loud stress, but we also needed the body to be able to put the brakes on things, or we would just adapt to so many different things that we would end up starving to death. So when we adapt, we've got to really mean it. But our tendency to manage resources means that we've got to slow walk it sometimes, that it's got to be consistent. This is something done over the long haul. And if we don't give ourselves adequate time to recover, we start to notice that we break down. We have to make some decisions. Your body's going to decide, well, do I keep his heart pumping or do I grow some muscle mass? And it's like, well, all right, I'm going to keep him alive, but he's going to be a little skinnier. And these are very oversimplified, but these are the decisions that the body needs to make. So
the body's going to tell you what's up no matter what.
No matter what.
Right? No matter what.
When we have chronic stressors, and when we have these signals popping up over and over and over again, but it starts to strain our abilities, right? We get a lot of stop signs, we get a lot of warning signs, we get a lot of, hey, let's calm down. And that's really what we're talking about. Having worked in, I don't work with many athletes. I don't really like to. I work with regular people. That's who I like to work with. And having worked with them for a long, long time, this is the part of the conversation they almost always ignore. They want to know, just tell me what to do. What that means, they'll do crazy workouts.
Yeah, 30 days shred them up, yo.
Sure. So they'll do crazy workouts, but you ask them to take a bubble bath and they lose their minds, right? So this is the part that people don't get. And it is especially lacking, I think, in the kettlebell community, because we're used to being able to work out every day if we want. The modality that we have chosen to train in allows less volume and breaks in ways that other modalities don't allow. So we can send these signals more consistently because the workouts tend not to be so grueling or over the top. However, it can lead to the fact that or this notion that people just ignore these stop signs, and recovery is as important as stress in this whole cycle. It's one has to, it's a
one for one, more or less, right?
Yeah, they're balanced. Yeah, it's a balance for sure. And yes, don't get me wrong, there are times when you want to really, really stress yourself out beyond what you can accommodate, right? Because that's what's going to cause the adaptation. But the recovery needs to happen at some point after. You can't just continue to hit this peak over, up and up and up and up and up. Bad things will happen and you will stop adapting. Your body does need to start making these decisions. And that's really what this is all about. So a little bit of the framework about, who we are as creatures and why that is, but we need to manage those resources effectively. So, if you are trying to, and a lot of people do this, you sit down with someone for the first time. Well, what do you want? What do you want to do? I want to get strong, and I want to get huge, and I want to get shredded. It's like all three of those things. Yeah. What's your time frame? Last week. Like, oh, cool. That's really, really doable.
Yeah.
one of the most common things is people want to gain muscle while they're in a caloric deficit.
That's impossible.
So if we're asking our bodies, these awesome resource managers, like, hey, give me some calories, right? Give me some calories to spend on some muscle mass, but I'm already in a deficit. It's not going to do that. So this is the idea that your recovery, your stress needs to respect your recovery. Your recovery needs to repair you from that stress. And if that doesn't work, then things get out of whack and you don't get what it is you want to get. So we need to talk about this whole recovery thing, what it is, and how do you respect it?
Well, first of all, how do you even know if you need more recovery? You got the tried and true method of listening to your body, which, as you mentioned before, people tend to ignore because this greater goal of shredded, stronger, bigger, faster, or whatever the case may be seems to permeate their brain so much that they won't take that time off. And, are you still enjoying the workouts, right? That'd probably be a good sign.
Sure, okay? Absolutely it is.
If you don't like what you're doing, trust me, I trained for a marathon and there was a period of time where it was pure misery. And I enjoy running, but it was misery because I wasn't recovered enough. And one of the things that's kind of unique to kettlebells, you experience this and I experience this, is sometimes the regular bell, let's say a 24, for example, just feels so much heavier. And it's just like you're dragging it off the rack and you're like, oh my God, I got to swing this. It feels like a 40. All right. And these are just some indications. So if this is going on, I mean, the list could go on. Obviously, we're not going to spend this whole time. If you're not recovering because you're like, oh, how could I recover? Or you're laid out on the floor and we'll never see you again because you chose not to recover.
So let's get a little more objective about these things. And I'm a big fan in not really going past the subjective. How does this bell feel? Mm-hmm. There are times when I've picked up a really heavy bell to move it, something I didn't plan on pressing. It was like, ooh, I can press that right now. And I did. No warm up, cold, just ready to go because I clue in. I pay attention to these things. But generally, if the bell feels heavy, and it often will, and these are not heavy bells for me, sometimes I'll move to 16 and be like, whoa, that feels heavy right now. That's not supposed to feel heavy. And guess what? More often than not, I do a little extra warm up and then I pick it up again and I see how my brain is responding. And then if it feels good, then I'll move forward into my practice. If not, I'm going for a walk. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to go sing in the shower. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do a workout today. But we can get somewhat objective. Pain is a big stop sign. Either you're under recovered or you're not giving yourself enough time to adapt. We are going to do an episode on that soon. The time it takes to adapt. Do your joints hurt? Are you experiencing problems with sleep? Mm-hmm. Are you experiencing a really rapid heart rate? A lot of people walk around with these, Fitbits and Apple Watches and all of these things where you have access to your heart rate. And if you, HRV is one of the things that people talk about as a sign. I don't know where I stand on that because I don't dig enough. I've read some good stuff and some people say, maybe it's not what we think it is. I don't know. But your body does respond at a level of your vitals if you're under recovered. So cravings, I think, are a big one. If you're really starting to crave junk food and
carbs,
this goes
glucose.
It goes back to this whole, primitive, me need calories kind of primitive creature. You're starting to really get these cravings. There's a good chance that you're under recovered because your body's stressed out and it's like, I need more. So it's not a slam dunk, but these are some things that you can pay attention to.
Definitely. And one thing that you're really good at, Roger, having trained with you for a long time and we work out together on a frequent basis, if you're really mentally fried, you're just going to take that time off. So that's another key in right there, not just the body, but if you're, a lot of what comes with kettlebells is this central nervous system that's required, especially if you're set up for a heavy session or a very high volume ballistic session or something like that. And if you're not there, it's probably a good idea to pivot to maybe something lighter, something less, or like the aforementioned walk or reading a book in a bubble bath. Roger's going to do all those things today. All right. So we now know what are some signs for being under recovered and that we're resource machines. What are some ways that as a kettlebell practitioner, we can now build this recovery or identify some recovery? And I know those are two separate things. So I'm just going to lead you down the path like a wee lad. Let's talk about waiving the load. You know what we went through before this, so some technicals. Anyways, so let's talk about waiving the load. And I think this is like one of the greatest things that you can do with the kettlebell, and it's like a real foundational aspect to specific training methods in particular that we've practiced and that I know many of our listeners have practiced. So let's just explain that for people who don't know or people who need that fresh reminder.
Waiving the load simply just means the load can go up and down, and you can waive load with using different size bells or with even changing sets and reps. There are different ways to do that. The idea behind waiving the load is taking what you normally do, and maybe you look at it even over the week and you do different. You maybe if you're doing, X amount of ladders, maybe you just do one, or maybe you do one today and then you do another one and then you do another one. Maybe you spread them out throughout the week. Maybe you use a bell that's a little bit lighter than you normally use. You're still getting the touches in, you're still getting the reps. You're still making progress, but you're allowing your system a different experience, and that can be refreshing mentally. You can feel more confident. You feel stronger because these are easy reps, and this is really good, especially if you're having some mental issues with your workouts and you just feel kind of psychologically beat up. This is particularly important with pressing, I think, because of all the different kettlebell moves. In my experience, the one that seems to be the most neurologically taxing is the overhead press, a heavy overhead press. I'm talking about like we're getting into half body weight territory. So that's not an exclusive, but this is where I often see it. So, you can play with, you can change the number of reps you do. You can take a set from here, add it to there, or just drop some sets. So just playing with different bell sizes throughout the week, that would be a really easy way to do it. Have a heavy, medium, light day, or you can do that in terms of bell size or volume. So just waiving that. If you know you want to get X amount of presses in over the week and you're starting to feel under recovered, you can say, well, I was going to do a press day, but these press days are really adding up. Guess what? I'm going to do 3 press days. I'm going to get the same amount of touches over the week, but I'm going to do them over 3 days, and I'm going to add them to some of my other work. I'm going to maybe deprioritize something. Let's say I've got 2 goals. One is a squat goal, one is a press goal, but the press goal is more important. So maybe I'll shave off a little bit of the squat work. I'm still going to do it, but I'm going to do less of it. And then I'm going to add some press work. So there are a lot of different ways to do it, but basically this idea of waiving, it's moving up and down. So you have a few touches with the bells you normally use. Who knows? Maybe you'll feel recharged and want to do some touches with heavier, right? That may be that may
that's
be
part of the wave
else.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you put a bigger peak on that wave, but then you're also dropping down and you're not doing that many touches with it. So you're doing more work at a lower percentage. So that's the way I usually do it. Either I spread my work over more time, or I will go up and down with the bells, and I have no problem with, if I'm scheduled for a press day, I'm very high endurance when it comes to pressing only, and I enjoy lifting heavy. But if I don't feel it, I'll get my touches in with a lighter bell, and then maybe later in the week, I'll just walk up and do some singles with my max beller close, and that keeps me on target. That lets me recover. But again, it allows things to go up and down rather than just staying at a consistent level.
Yeah, and a great way to program that is certainly that heavy, medium, light sort of rotation. And then subsequently, that gives you time in those between days to take said walks or something like that. That's a little bit more, or maybe some mobility work in there. Maybe that's when you're doing some of these things that aren't as demanding. And particularly important that you mentioned was spreading that press volume out and actually just incorporating that in with some of the other work. So instead of doing like, oh my gosh, this is like, and I've come across this doing many press programs, attempting and getting to half body weight presses and stuff like that, yeah, sometimes it's great to just go balls to the wall and press as much as possible every time you're expected to press. But other times it begins to wear on you, so that just pressing maybe 2 sets on this day and then doing like some additional work and then 3 sets on the next day instead of 5 sets on one day, and then having that separated and according. So that's some good solid programming right there, Roger. So not only are we recovering people, we're giving them programming here. Now, how do I know if I'm working hard enough? You had touched on this in the previous episode 11, where you briefly mentioned the RPE, the rating of perceived exertion. And I know we have a cool, at least you have this cool way of like combining the RPE scale and percentages and how effective that can be. Let's talk about that a little bit. First, explain to the people, if you don't already know, what the RPE scale generally consists of.
So it's rate of perceived exertion, and what we're really looking at is perceived. This is a subjective measure. This is, how do we feel when we're doing something? How hard is this? So I've seen a few scales. The most common is 1 to 10. 1 being I'm doing barely anything. 10, like, this is max work. I'm working as hard as possible. So again, this is about the perception of the work. This isn't an objective measure. So a more objective measure would be a percentage based. So my max bench press is 100 pounds.
Wow.
So if
those are big boobies for 100-pounder, right?
So my max bench press is 100 pounds, then 70 pounds would be 70%, right? So that's objective. Now, who knows, maybe my max has gone up or my max has gone down. But if I'm doing, let's say I'm having a good day and I'm maxing and I'm doing my max, right? And it doesn't feel hard at all, probably isn't my max anymore. So I have the objective measure of how close I will get to that 100 pounds. That will base my programming. I will base my programming off of those percentages, right? And I will think about how hard it feels. So there are times, and this is there are reasons why I use both of these scales, why I think they're important. And I think they're important because there are a lot of either or people. And the RPE people will, in my experience, sometimes shrug off work that they should really do. And they don't have an objective measure to see how they're doing. So for example, you might feel that the work you're doing is very difficult, yet you're doing more volume with the same load, right? So we have a subjective measure that says, hey, maybe I need some recovery. But then we have an objective measure that says, I'm actually getting stronger, which would lead me to think that maybe it's more of a mindset thing or it's an emotional thing. We don't disregard it, right? If this becomes a trend and you feel, even if you're performing, you feel really, really sluggish, you may want to look into that recovery piece, but, or maybe just change your work, who knows, but it could be more mental than physical. But what I will do is, if I notice that I have a particular work, some work set aside. So let's say my goal is to work with 85% of my max. Let's keep going with this overhead press scenario. Mm-hmm. I want to do some work with 85% of my max bell, right? So I'm doing it and I start doing this and I'm thinking, if we're looking at RPE, it's 1 to 10, which was really, you can break down into 10% to 100%, right? So
yeah, so you're like an 8.5 RPE scale with this.
Sure. But, and this feels like a 10 out of 10 in terms of RPE. This is crazy. What I might do is I might back that number down and I might work with the bell that's 65, 70%. I'll do more volume, right? I'll get more touches and I can still gain strength with that percentage of my max, but I'm respecting the RPE as well. So that might be enough, almost like, also like waving the load, where you're doing the same, but different. Right.
Yeah.
You're giving your body a different experience of the load, different sets, different reps. And you're respecting the fact that I don't really feel good doing this. So let me back off. I'm still getting a stimulus, right? I'm still training toward this because I know that with 65%, I can still make strength gains, but I'm not pushing the issue and I'm not risking an injury. And more importantly, I'm not feeling super burnt out after every workout.
Yeah. And you know that over time and working the process, you will achieve that result. So,
sure. And this goes back to, this is one of the reasons why we foregrounded this episode in the fact that, yes, we adapt, but we adapt slowly. We're resource managers. So it's better to push that consistency piece rather than that intensity piece. Intensity is important. There's no doubt. If you don't have enough intensity, your body won't adapt. Yeah. But the consistency piece is what really works and what really seems to go with how we change as humans. So whatever you can do to keep that consistency up, great. A lot of people don't do this, especially people new to kettlebells. You'll get somebody who they're making these crazy gains. They're mostly neurological, which can happen even in a single session. And their bell size is going way up, or they took this new pre-workout and they feel superhuman and they're ready to go. And it's like, hold on now, I get you feel good, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's time to move on, because you haven't really laid the adequate foundation. You haven't built the physical capacity you need. And more relevant to what we're talking about today is you're going to push yourself into a place where you may not be able to recover as easily, right? So either A, you get an injury, or B, you feel kind of burnt out. Maybe it's not that bad. You just are super sore and you don't work out for 4 days because you can barely walk or sit on the toilet.
Yeah. Or you blew out some elbows or something like that because you did
whatever it happens to
tissue
be.
Adaptation, and
sure.
now you're forced recovery, and everybody loves forced recovery.
Sure. So now we're looking at a scenario where when we're looking at the volume over time, the what you're actually doing, all the different touches. Just by touches, I just mean reps. How many times you're getting those reps in over time? All of a sudden, these numbers are dropping. And when you're looking at a block of, let's say, a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, the number of your intensity might be way up, but your reps are way down and your body reflects it. You look kind of the same as when you started. And yes, you're building these peaks, but you're not ever letting the true adaptation set in because you're not respecting that recovery process. So for me, I think it's important to respect the RPE. How hard does this feel? But also ground it with a basic percentage that will let you know if these things are kind of jiving or not. And if RPE says it's hard and your percentage, your 65% feels like 85%, then you definitely need to address that recovery piece or go to a doctor or something.
Yeah. And keep it simple. Just like Roger mentioned, if you're, basing on 100 percentage, 70% is about a 7, 80% is about an 8, give or take, and you can align those up. Now, in order to realize if you're reaching your potential, we talked about having key performance indicators, KPI, folks. You hear this in your business world all day, your office. They're like, let's hear about those KPIs, Ted. Well, there's some KPIs in kettlebells too. What do you think about that imitation of the office guy? Doesn't matter. Moving on. Okay. All right. So it's basically about what you're measuring, because what you measure is going to ultimately tell you if you're making progress. Duh. So what are some KPIs and some things to consider in this kettlebell world and in respect to recovery?
Well, they should be relevant to your goals. So, if you're working for a half body weight press, then obviously either the maximal load that you can lift or the volume you can do with a sub-maximal load, those would be KPIs. So I can lift more, or I can do more with a lighter bell. Those are important. If you're working with, let's say you're looking to do a snatch test, right? You're looking to crush a bunch of 100 reps into 5 minutes. So you may want to measure how many reps you can do in that 5 minute span, right?
And there's a starting point.
Sure. You can do it, like, hey, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes and I'm going to see how many snatches I can do. And is that number going up or is that number going down? Because if that number is going down, either A, the stress that you are using to elicit progress is insufficient, or B, which is more often the case, it's too much and you're not recovering from it. So, maybe you just need to even switch your program around a little bit. Sometimes people will
switch my program around.
Maybe people are like, oh, well, I can do grind ballistic 6 days a week. Well, maybe you can't. Or maybe you have high recovery, high endurance with grind lifts, but not ballistic lifts, or the opposite, right? Maybe you need to put an extra couple days in between, these particular types of lifts, and then all of a sudden you're stronger. But this is really important, that you need to give time for the adaptation to happen. But when you have a KPI, which a percentage, that's another objective thing, something else that you could use, just like percentage. When you have a KPI that is improving, you can start making decisions. So, this is your goal, or one step that you would need to successfully complete in order to hit that goal. So you want to keep that in mind. And if your KPI is not, if you're looking to become a faster sprinter and your time is dropping, something's not working, you need to go back and reevaluate. And that recovery piece, that recovery piece may not be great. And there really, there aren't that many things you need to do when it comes to recovery. I mean, we talked about ways to manage recovery within your workout by changing, by waiving loads or
taking longer rests.
Yeah. Rearranging your workout schedule. But, there's some simple things. I mean, you like recovery stuff. What are some of the things that you do? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to shift your brain. You've got to shift your brain into rest mode.
Yeah.
So what do you do for that?
Well, real quick before I explain that, I want to just add this little tidbit here. We seem fixated on a 7-day week training cycle where I train on the 7 days. But did you know you can actually make it 10 days and then give yourself even more rest in between? And that's one of the places I start. If I feel like, all right, I'm not recovering enough, I switch from a 7-day cycle where it's this, then this, then this, then this, where it's this. Okay, this was heavier. I know I need 2 more days after this to recover. And so maybe that's just some active recovery. Walks are something I use a ton. I like, believe it or not, as you build up to this, it can be incorporated into active recovery with a ruck or something like that. Nothing crazy, but it just add a little bit something to it. It's a little bit active. One of the things I love to do is I like to roll out, and I do this at night. I'll roll out a nice rollout session at night, do some release with some trigger point spots on my body. And then, believe it or not, I do stretch. And I don't know if it's like meaningful stretches that somebody could walk in and be like, yes, you're making an achievement there. But I do know that over the course of time, and I'm not going crazy, this is like a 10-minute ordeal. It's not like 30 minutes set aside. It's like 10 minutes at the end of the night. I'm going to stretch it out. I'm going to stretch my quads. I'm going to do I've been enjoying the bretzel lately. That's been a nice one. As I was like, oh, maybe I need some more, I need a looser T-spine. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm going with that. And it actually hits a lot of spots that I need. And then I'll like stretch my hips and I'll do a little hamstring stretch. I'll reach for those toes like old school. And this is sort of like an interesting thing when it comes to this recovery. I am not trying to force myself into anything. I take it slow. I stretch my hamstrings with my knees bent for a long time. And then over time, my legs start to I can stretch those hamstrings with my knees straighter and then straight finally. And it just takes time. And it's not anything for me to be like, oh yeah, my goal is to Van Damme it and do the splits over 2 cars driving by. It's just a way for me to signal to myself that the day's over. I'm stretching, I'm shutting down, I'm getting ready for bed, sort of thing.
And that's really the point. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I just am. Ignore everything else he said, because
the key nugget was there at the end.
It may not apply to you. We're not always entirely, you hear different camps with stretching, and I really don't care. But one thing that I will maintain is that last thing that he said is the most important. It's a signal for him to power down. That it's time for me. It shifts him into a different part of his brain where, hey, it's time to rest. This is something he enjoys doing. It builds him up. Whether it makes him more flexible, less flexible, who knows?
Probably
this is well, again, there are different ways to look at it.
I don't have a KPI around it. I'm not like trying to like achieve a goal with it.
Sure. But the point is it switches him off. So for me, one of mine is I love meditation and breath work. it settles me down and I feel fantastic after I do it. So, this is just a way, again, you're taking the dial and you're getting it out of, that stressful workout place or that stressful life place. And then you're bringing your brain into a different spot. You're slowing down your breath. That's the easiest way to do it. As far as I know, there's a direct link between breathing and hormonal responses in your brain and what mode you're in. So I'll do that. Don't forget sleep. Don't forget hydration. Don't forget nutrition. We don't want to go down these rabbit holes because this stuff is out there.
Yeah, it's fairly obvious to the world. Yeah.
And most of the information I think you get is pretty good. So, take some of that. I personally stay away from the fringy stuff, like
dipping your face in Saratoga water.
Well, like I don't have an opinion on cold plunging, for example, because I've been doing this long enough to know that when something comes out and it's the latest, greatest thing and it does everything, and you can grow back another ear if you've lost one. And I know in time things settle and then we figure out what this actually does. So maybe it's amazing. I'm just a very slow adopter. So, but there are some very simple, tried and true things. Focus on those. Just get your body in a place where you feel relaxed. A lot of people, one common argument I have with my clients who are very smart people, I promise, but they're clearly
especially if you're listening,
they're clearly under recovered, and they're telling me that they recover by watching TV. So how often do you do that? Oh, every night. I was like, okay, well, we have all these signs that are saying that you're under recovered. You're stressed out. You're not fun to be around. So you're super grouchy. Maybe this thing that you're doing every day isn't actually helping you, or they do it right before bed. Yeah. Maybe it's stimulating rather than relaxing you. Just maybe consider
probably it. Roger, probably. I remember just the other day we were watching a movie and I'm like really amped up. It's night and I'm like, that's why I don't watch movies at night, because I get too like, oh man, this is way too intense for me.
Sure. My favorite is I wind down by watching the news. Like, I don't know what news you're watching.
Yeah, seriously. I hope that
does not wind
news.
me down.
Yeah. Anyways, real quick, one of the things that I think you mentioned in our prep that I think is very valuable, and let's just finish it up with that, is a go-to move. So sort of like a wind up for your workout. So you mentioned that you feel, and I actually share this sentiment, and I'll let you elaborate on your own, but you mentioned that almost always, if you're feeling crappy, some Mace 360s to kind of get you in the mood is exactly what is needed. And I'll agree with that. But how does that work for you, Roger? And maybe it's a good idea for all these people out there that are listening and finding their ways to recover, that they have a go-to move that indicates like a wind up, so to speak.
Well, the idea of the go-to move can do a few things. It can be, let me do this and see how I feel. Maybe I can move into more work, because maybe, this goes back to the duality of the RPE versus the percentage method. It's maybe my RPE is really high with movement, but it will drop or it will change. And then I actually feel pretty good in my body and I want to do more work. So this is a way to allow me to do more work potentially, or give me the chance to build into a full workout. Or it is a way to continue to get some work done, because recovery doesn't always mean just taking the day off. It might mean doing less. So I will feel better that I've done something. Mentally, I'm not going to beat myself up because,
because you were like, I did nothing. Yeah, you missed something. Exactly.
One thing that I've heard Eric Cressy say quite a few times is don't miss modify. So don't miss an entire workout. Just modify it. Get out there, see what you can do, and try to get the work in. And most of the time, I think that makes sense. So for me, Mace 360s are one of those moves. I can be sick. I can be tired. I've never picked up a mace and I'm like, I don't want to do this at all. I really don't mind doing it. It somehow, it relaxes me. You're going to get a lot of people who are probably into more of the neurological aspect of training. And maybe we're going to talk about things like the cerebellum and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that's all true. I don't think about that. I just think,
yes, prefrontal cortex, hippocampus. Let's say all the brain parts.
It's if you haven't looked into the neuro side of training, it's actually pretty cool. And there are some things that can stimulate your brain. But, for me, Mace 360s are just something I can do. I'll start light, and I usually end up going heavier. Cleans and presses. I can almost always do cleans and presses. Even if I don't do cleans with every press, I've got the presses. And one of my go-to things, if I'm really feeling like I don't really want to do much of anything, I'll pick a bell that feels very comfortable, and I'll just go down the line. 9 out of 10 times I change the bell midway. Like I'll start with a 16, which is extremely light for me, just to get the blood pumping. And by the end, I'm using, sometimes I'm using a 28 or a 32 because I feel better. But I'll do some iron cardio. I'll go to, here's the shameless plug for the Bells app. I'll go to the Bells app and I'll do straight sets. And I'll decide, I like to start with 20. So I'll do 20 sets, and, I'll do a clean, a press, squat. That's 1. Put the bell down, shake it off, do one with the other arm. That's 2. Or the other side, that's 2. I'll do 20 rounds of that. I'll play with the bell in between, meaning maybe I'll go up and wait. And then maybe I want to do more. Maybe I feel good to do 30, or maybe I feel good to do 40. So having a couple of go-to moves, these are my go-to moves or my go-to protocols that really just allow me to, it's something I don't really think about all that much, and I can just go. I'll put on a podcast or audiobook.
Like this one?
Probably not, but
okay.
I remember most of the stuff I say.
Well, one shameless plug's good enough for me, Roger.
But yeah, it's important to have some go-to moves, some things that you just don't mind doing. And walking is always one of those things.
Yep. 100%. I'm almost very similar. I'm the Mace 360. A walk, usually get it done. And I love double bell cleans. That, like, couple 20s, I can know in a hot second, if I do a few sets of the double 20s, what's happening next. And the cool thing about kettlebells is you can do all kinds of stuff all the time, anytime you want, and it contributes to a big overarching goal in the end of general fitness, if that's what you're into. All right. Anything else?
No, it was quick. It was like that old Micro Machines commercial.
Yeah, yes. My grandfather was an auctioneer. So, hey.
Is that where? Never mind.
Yes, that's exactly it. All right. Well, be sure to like and subscribe, and do us a favor. If you found some value in this, go ahead and leave a review on the Apple Podcast app. That would really show others that listen to this type of stuff that we're worthy. And, we are worthy. Self-talk is a good way to recover. Anyways, thanks for listening. Download the Bells app from the Apple App Store, and stay strong, everybody.